Pashtuns, and indeed there were cases of intermarriage. These were the positive developments and served to enrich the local culture in many ways. But the Afghan refugees, unlike those from India, had not come to settle in Pakistan. Indeed, they were in the midst of an historic struggle against the Soviet occupiers. The camps in Pakistan were a resting place for the Mujahideen fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan, and a safe haven for their families from the bombings and the carnage that modern weaponry can cause. The struggle against the Soviet occupiers was no doubt a nationalist struggle of the Afghans against a foreign invader. But to motivate the resistance, an added incentive or appeal was provided by it being cast as a jihad against the infidel invader. A struggle for Afghanistan as well as Islam. Indeed, as things eventually turned out, the slogan of jihad was very effective in sustaining the flow of young volunteers ready to give their lives for their faith, for God and country, so to say. The Afghan resistance received continuous and substantial assistance from the Western powers, particularly the United States. This took two forms. First was the flow of arms, and second, financial assistance to Afghan political parties that form the leadership of the resistance. Of the seven recognized political parties in the Afghan resistance, 5 were led by religious leaders. What is more, the religious parties were the most effective, active and effective in the resistance. So the stress on the Islamic inspiration for the struggle against godless communism was almost all pervasive. As the struggle continued, the religious parties, with the flow of funds and arms, not only from Western sources but also from Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states, also continued to gain strength. For more than a decade and a half, Afghan schools in the refugee camps in Pakistan taught a strongly religious curriculum. So the next generation of young men grew up with a spirit infused with strong religious and nationalistic sentiments at the same time. A discussion of what effect these developments had on Afghanistan is a subject for a separate occasion. Here, I wish to look for what effects these developments had in the Pakistani milieu. The flow of arms to the Afghan resistance inevitably found its way into the local markets. I know many friends who bought Kalashnikov assault rifles in the open market because they were going for a song. Indeed, it wasn't very long before the Pakistani media started talking about, and I quote, the Kalashnikov culture, unquote. And of course, the dangers inherent in such a culture to stability and order in the country. At the same time, Pakistan was also passing through a period of military dictatorship under General Zia-ul-Haq. To bolster his position against the political opposition to him, he allied himself with the religious parties. The Afghan crisis provided him with an incentive to strengthen his alliance with the religious parties and also to obtain the backing of the Western powers, Saudi Arabia, and of course the United States. It was General Zia who then introduced the system of religious seminaries in Pakistan, the madrasas as they call. Some did exist before him, but he introduced it with official backing. And the numbers are very large, more than 1,000, I'd imagine. The Soviets eventually withdrew from Afghanistan. But the legacy of the war in Afghanistan is still with us. The strengthening of political parties that remain in the mainstream of political activities is manageable within a democratic constitutional system, provided it is allowed to work. Given free elections and an opportunity for political parties to campaign freely, it is still likely that the religious parties will be confined to a minority in parliament. It is the extremist groups that function outside the political mainstream and are certainly not prepared to expose themselves to the test of freely fought elections that pose a very serious dilemma. Confessional politics, in the best of circumstances, can lead to incendiary situations. With the flow of money and arms and the sectarian conflicts that are inevitable in such situations, that situations where confessional politics are practiced, the many incidents of sectarian violence in Pakistan are no longer a surprise. In all the circumstances, given the bitter legacy of the years of governmental support for religious schools during the military regime of General Zia, the current emphasis by General Musharraf on enlightened moderation, quote unquote, signals a very important and long needed change in direction. But I must say that this cannot be done simply by decree or by fiat. To take root, a change in direction must come through the expression of the popular will, through the effective political process of freely held elections. Until that happens, Pakistan has to live with the legacy of the Afghan wars as best it can. I've given you a brief summary of these two cases. There's much more in there, presumably for discussion, but they are very different. And an issue that may come up for discussion also is the role of United Nations agencies in such circumstances. I can't give you full answers, but let's discuss it, and we move on from here. Thank you very much.